You can be seated. Good morning. On Friday, someone sent me a blog posting of a Christian who was concerned about the dramatic drop in Christians in the country. For people professing to be Christians, it's down to like 70, a little over 70%. And he wrote an article in which he basically said, I think it's happening because church is boring. And it wasn't quite the article I was expecting it to be. When I got done with it, his gripe was that the church was hesitant to proclaim the truth, and sometimes calling people to action, telling them to get out there and do something. And so this morning it's going to be, we can't be accused of that. This morning we're going to talk about action. We're going to talk about getting involved. We're going to talk about doing something. We're going to take our reading from Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 and 9. What a lot of people don't know about Proverbs is that it starts off by telling you that these are the words of an oracle from a mother to King Lemuel. Lemuel was likely the name of King Solomon, but this was supposed to be a mother's words of wisdom to her son. And it's a typical expression of a mother's wishes to her son. Verse 3 warns him about don't run around with wild women. And then verses 4 to 7 warns him about the dangers of drinking to excess. And then, in light of his position in office, she gets to verses 8 and 9, and in verses 8 and 9 gives him this instruction, and that is that you are to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. So we're going to talk about this being our time to act, our time to speak up, our time to get the message across. And because these are the words of a mother to a son, I thought that I would recall for a moment my mom and dad. My mom and dad are very much alive. They live next door. 15 years ago, we had decided that we were going to take care of my parents as they got older. So we built their house next door to us out in the country. And my mother just turned 77 on May 7th. Very lively. She's been a go-getter. She immigrated from the Netherlands out to Stockton, Lodi, California area, and then met my father out there, and then came to Wisconsin, and the rest is great history. But my mother is a ball of energy. She answers the call to action at any time. She's our number one volunteer at CLR. She'll call the pastors for us. She'll do all sorts of, she'll put together envelopes. She'll call volunteers to bring them in. She heads up at the church that I also serve. She heads up the visitation team that calls on the shut-ins and the people who are recovering from illnesses and so forth. And anything I ask her, she's going to do it. She jumps right in. Okay, now my mom and dad are living testimonies to the fact that people are not opposites to attract. Because now my mom's willing to jump right in. My father is just the complete opposite. My father turned 80 on April 20th, and his entire life, he's never been one to just get real, jump into it. And I think back, when I was about 10 years old, my youngest brother, I've got 3 younger brothers, my youngest brother, who's a pastor now out in Austin, Minnesota, was in a high chair, and we were eating at the dinner table, and he started choking on something. And my mother panicked a little bit, and the rest of us boys all stared in complete, panic, I suppose. And my father just calmly put down his fork and knife, and got up, walked over to the high chair, grabbed him up with one hand, spun him upside down, smacked him hard on the back, dislodged whatever was stuck in his throat, sat him back down in the chair, sat down in his chair, turned to me and said, "Robert, would you pass me the mashed potatoes?" But one thing that's interesting about my parents is that they taught us 4 boys that regardless of different personalities, regardless of different upbringing, when it's time to act, we got to act. We got to step forward. We got to do something. We got to get the job done, and that's the responsibility we have. So we're going to talk about that. this morning, and we're going to talk about it in four ways. We're going to, first of all, look at the causes, the issues that call for us to act. And then we're going to look at the kind of actions we should take. What should we be doing, and so forth. Then we're going to look at the timing. When is the time to act? And then finally, we're going to look at our motivation. Now, causes. Christian Life Resources began in the late 1970s with a single pregnancy counseling center in northern Illinois. And when it began, everyone was concerned. Conservative Bible-believing Christians were concerned about the legality of abortion that happened on January 22nd, 1973. And because they were concerned, a lot of people wanted to go out and save the babies and so forth. But Christians have this one nagging assignment from God, and that is the Great Commission. You and I are called upon to spread the word, to get the message out, to tell people about Jesus. And so the people who began the organization said, this is a great way to take people at a crisis moment, an unplanned pregnancy in their life, and to talk to them about Jesus, about the one who gave life and the one who redeemed life, through his Son. So that's how it began. When it actually became a national organization in May of 1983, we had about a dozen and a half pregnancy counseling centers scattered across the country. And from 1983 to 1988, I started full-time in 1988. All of us were volunteers. But we still had a national convention. And one year, 1985, we worked out a deal at Marquette University. Marquette in Milwaukee was bringing in, we sat down with them and we said we would like to split the cost because we're always looking to do things cheaply. And we brought in C. Ever Koop, who was the U.S. Surgeon General at the time. And when Dr. Koop spoke at our convention, I remember it like it was yesterday. He said these words. He said, it's a small leap in logic to go from taking life inside of the womb to taking life outside of the womb. And he was prophetic, really. Today, it's legal for a physician to assist in suicide in 5 states. And the Netherlands, which is where my mother came from, has been practicing euthanasia for many years. And in 2006, they expanded it to include children, and they developed a thing called the Groningen Protocol. And the Groningen Protocol is a checklist that parents who give birth to a child with some disability can go through this checklist, and everything checks out. They can request the physician to give an injection to end the child's life. It's a small leap in logic to go from taking life inside of the womb to taking life outside of the womb. So at Christian Life Resources, we primarily deal in life issues. Sometimes we get into some family issues, marriage and so forth, but our real focus has been life issues and treating people, and not just treating people in the way they want to be treated, but always ask the question, what would God have me to do? How would God want me to live? So those are the issues that we use, okay? And then action. Now when people think life issues, the action that often comes to mind is protesting. People think we should go out and we should be protesting. We should be writing letters to our newspapers and to our legislators. We should run for office. We should get involved with political action groups and so forth, and really get involved to make a difference. That's all fine. I'm not saying I disagree with anything, but that's a little bit different than the way I see our assignment. God has called you and me to speak and to proclaim and to talk to people. So we really have a situation where we need to develop a relationship. Now, when I talk about developing a relationship, think about this. There are some of my peers in the pro-life movement who tend to get very boisterous. They yell and they scream and they hold up gory pictures and they do all those kinds of things. And that seems to be where they feel that they're called. But because as Christians we're called upon to tell people about Jesus, it presumes that you have to have a relationship. And so in order to have a relationship, you don't insult people, you don't offend them, you don't scare them, but rather you try to build a relationship. You try to find an opportunity to talk and also to sacrifice. And the kind of actions that we are to take is a willingness to carry burdens, a willingness to help be part of the solution instead of just a critic of what's wrong. Then comes the issue of timing. When's the right time? Sometimes people have always felt that maybe these issues aren't our issues. There's nobody in my family that wants to have an abortion. We would never pull the plug on Grandpa. We would never ask the doctor to give a lethal injection to Grandma. None of those are our issues. But the thing is these issues do affect us very much. And just the abortion issue, since January 22nd, 1973, there have been 57.5 million abortions in the United States. Now, proportionately speaking, 69,000 of those would have been members of the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. And proportionately speaking, 62 of those would have been members of this church. And so it does affect us. It does affect us very much. And so we sometimes wonder, what can we do? And when's the timing? I don't know. When does it need to be a crisis enough? It's interesting. A lot of times I'll get people who will come to me and they'll say, okay, we should do something. But they proceed to start telling me things like, don't ask me to speak publicly. I'm scared to death to talk publicly. And then they'll say, don't ask me for money. I don't have any money. And I'm very busy, so is it something I can do at home? And so we tend to kind of say, I want to get involved, I want to do something, but it needs to fit my own schedule. Have you ever thought that your own schedule and your own priorities might not be right? For example, the old I'm afraid to speak in public. I had the opportunity a number of years ago to attend a county board meeting in which we were going to be talking about some funding issue. And it was very controversial. It had to do with funding groups that support abortion. And I showed up and the room was packed, just packed with people. And I thought, wow, Christians are really concerned, really involved. It turned out that Marcus, who's they have all the theaters a lot in southeast Wisconsin, wanted to convert his old movie theater into a dog racing track. And all the neighbors were showing up because they were positive it would hurt their property values. Are you more inclined to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, or are you more inclined to speak up when they want to hurt your property value? And the same thing too, people will say, well, I want to support a good cause, but money is just really tight and everything. Now, I don't know what it's like here in Idaho, but like in Wisconsin when we hear that, it is amazing because, getting a hold of a Packer ticket is a pretty rare thing in Wisconsin. It's like a 37-year waiting list or something. So when all of a sudden a Packer ticket becomes available, you'd be surprised how people who have no money could find the money to buy the Packer ticket. But in other words, it just reflects bad priority. My point is that the timing is now to act. You have 62 less members because of what happened in 1973. How many more does it have to be? Then we get to the point of motivation. Why get involved? I know what it means to be busy, and so busy that you can't get around to being involved. And a lot of people like to get involved in this kind of work because they like to cuddle with babies. Generally, like when we had the Home for Mothers in Denver before we moved it to Milwaukee, and we have every year, and we're going to start that in Milwaukee too, we have an ice cream social. Everybody wants to come and hold the babies, at New Beginnings. And it's fine, but that's not what it's all about. It's not about cuddling babies. It's sometimes about doing a lot of sacrificing for people you never meet, people that will never thank you. So why do you do it? Well, we're told that Christ's love compels us. We're compelled by the love that we have demonstrated by Christ. And the thing about Christ's love is that that's called agape love. And agape love isn't just affectionate love. Agape love is commitment love. And the commitment love is this. It's that while we were still sinners, when we were most unlovable, unlikable, intolerable, God sent his Son to die for us. And that's commitment. Even when it wasn't fun, even when it cost him his life, he did it for us. And then you and I are instructed to love as we have been loved. So I encourage all of you to consider that now is the time to act. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, but now. Think about the opportunities you have. God has given you your life as a time of grace, a time to come to faith, and then a time to grow in faith, to live your faith and to share your faith. And I ask you to consider now how you might be a steward of those resources and to act now to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Amen.
One of the opportunities we have to place our faith into practice is as we worship.